What's up? Do you ever wonder like what actually you have power over? Do you wish you had control over everything in your life, that you could just control the world and people and circumstances? Well, today you're in luck. We're going to talk about what's in your control. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm here with my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny,
I forgot to
this
introduce
isn't this
myself.
isn't a philosophical thing. They never talk about what's in your control.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It is funny though, because I think people don't think about this a lot, and they think more stuff should be in their control than really is, I think, a lot of times. And we make the
Hmm.
mistake too of thinking that we don't have control where we do. I think there's like it's common to do this because I was mentioning right before we did this, like I was actually just teaching with a summer class going over Epictetus on, the dichotomy of control. And it's funny because every time I introduce it to students, I always get pushback of like, well, that's kind of like, and it's like, well, no, that's outside, like they'll think that things outside of them should be in their control, or they're resistant to thinking that like they really have control over like their attitude, their emotions, their thoughts.
Hmm.
Like they really want to assume, and I think part of it is because we don't want to take responsibility either for stuff. Like it is easier. I see that a lot where like I literally had a student one time tell me they were like, I was like, what are you studying? And they said like I forget the major they said, but they're like, my mom, really thought it'd be a good idea to do this. I was like, you don't want to pick it yourself? They're like, well, I thought this way if it doesn't go well, like at least like it's not my fault. I was like, that's
Terrible.
crazy, right? Like, and I was like, but it is your fault. I was like, because you still chose to do it. You're
Hmm.
still the one doing it. So
Yep.
it is still on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because we're inundated from a very young age. They say like go to school, get good grades, get into a good college, get a good job, get married. And it's like all these things are things that are out of your control. Like all that you
Yeah.
can ever really do is put in your best effort. And
Yeah.
like kind of concern yourself with your thoughts and judgments and decisions, but that's pretty much it. The rest of it, all this other stuff is chance. Like sure, if you put in more work, there's a better chance that you'll have a better outcome, but it's definitely not guaranteed.
Well, I think that's what we forget, right? Is that where our control lies is in the effort we put in the attitude maybe we bring to it, and that kind of stuff. But we can't control how it's going to be evaluated, how it's going to work out. And I think we're seeing a lot of that now because all these kids have been, told, right? Like, go to school, get good grades, you'll get a good job. They think it's like, they think it's a
Hmm.
causal relationship, right? Like, I get the degree, I get the good job, and then they find out that it's not actually related at all. And
Hmm.
then they get stressed out, upset, mad, and it's like, well, because it doesn't play out that way. And it's funny that like you see this emphasis so much now on like getting A's and stuff, regardless of like what you learn or what you get out of it or anything, just because they think that's the way to get that next step.
I was just it would make more sense if, there was just like a Google University, you know, and they just had an education program for people that they for things that people they'd want to hire to know and just teach them that stuff. And for all these
Yeah.
companies to do that, but of course it would be like, no, that's not, you know, but it would
That
it
would
would just
cost
make
us money and do
yeah, yeah.
things. Yeah.
It would just make more sense because then they'd brainwash them and all this
Well,
stuff.
dude, that's what I don't understand. There's so many, I know it's so funny because there's so many industries, jobs where like doing the learning like on job or doing like an apprentice style learning would be so much more effective and you get so much better people out of it because you get exactly what you wanted, people that knew exactly what you want them to know. Like, I mean, like, it would just be better overall because that's
Hmm.
kind of how it used to be though. Education used to be about learning how to think, learning how to critically think, to solve problems, and then you learn specific skills outside of that, and now it's like we try to do all that very focused, specialized learning, but then you get a bunch of people that don't really know how to solve problems. They don't really know how to critically think, but they know how
Hmm.
to run like these machines and run these tests and stuff, or whatever. But like, and it's kind of funny that we flipped that, I guess, in this weird way. I think that's part of also like we're told all these things about like this expectation of what you do and what you'll get from it to kind of keep people motivated towards it, I guess. But it's a problem because that does mess up our sense of control and what's within our control, right?
Yeah. I know that I get frustrated on a regular basis because I make my happiness and peace of mind dependent upon things that are not in my control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah. And it's like I want to learn things faster than I can. And it's just like, well, the speed that I can learn it is not in my control. Like I can put in effort, I can study, I can try again and again, but I'll learn it when I learn it, not any time sooner. And it's just that's not in my control. But because I'm focused on that as opposed to just focused on, okay, I put in the work today, that's good. You know?
Dude, I know I've been trying to work on that so much more because I feel like I get I get hyper focused on like trying to get all this crap done to race ahead to where I think I should be, I guess, or something, even though I'm getting a lot done. But then
Hmm.
in doing that, I also that inadvertently causes me to neglect other things that I don't want to neglect, like,
Yeah.
relationships, hobbies, things like that. Then I get upset about that. And it's like because really, I it's balancing both time, but also recognizing too that these things just take time. There's no way to like race ahead or speed it up because like it's gonna take time to process and stuff. And like we talked about this before, like, we're like hey, you mentioned that stat of like doing something 5 minutes a day is better than doing it like 3.5 hours once a week, right? Because you're
Hmm.
getting that repetition, the constant sort of like that constant sort of exposure that makes you remember it a lot more and better and long term than that
Hmm.
one, dipping in once a week and doing a lot.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if it's due to the world that we live in nowadays, where like we keep seeing it fall apart over and over again. And it
Like
definitely
every
like
few years.
yeah, like every 8 years or something, it falls apart again. And it just feels like inherently insecure. And it feels like nobody's got your back because the government doesn't give a shit about you and nobody else cares about you. And like families in America are falling apart. So it's just like,
There's no community. Yeah, you feel
yeah.
very alone. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder if
Yeah.
that's part of it.
I'm sure it is though, because I think we all feel that. Like I know I felt that, dude. Like it's like we graduating college, like right during financial crises and stuff and things fall. It's like you get out in this world that like you couldn't anticipate. It's not in your control.
Hmm.
But then you're left with this situation and it's like, well, I did all that stuff, and these expectations. I think that's also the problem with when we don't know what's or when we're not aware of what's within our control, we build up these expectations and beliefs that are false because they're on a premise that we're owed something, basically
Hmm.
from the world that we're not owed,
Hmm.
and that also makes it easier to fall into like depression and stuff like that because we feel like just no matter what we do, it's not working out almost, right?
Okay, so you mentioned depression, and I just thought that's kind of interesting because with depression, it's kind of the flip side of things being in your control. Because in normal life, we think all these things are in our control when they're not. But with depression, it gives us this feeling of helplessness where things are actually in our control, we think are not. That's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's like a reversal, right? Where like
Hmm.
you go from one extreme to the other, being in that like middle where we should be probably, right? Which is
Hmm.
recognizing that like we can do what we can do basically and then
Hmm.
see what happens. But it's
Yeah.
funny too, because I think everyone, anybody that does anything learns that like, the only way to create opportunities, the only way to make anything is to do stuff too, is to put in the effort, is to make changes, to do things, and then you see the results as more opportunities and potential things coming your way, basically, because you have built up the skills or whatever, And I think that's where we fail too. We focus too much on ends rather than like the means to the end or the journey, I guess, of like what's within our control, right? Like we know like transitioning careers, right? Like we knew we could learn programming. That's totally within our power. Now, what happens after that, I have no idea, right? Because I can't predict it. I can't. But
Hmm.
by putting that effort, I open up that possibility of these opportunities now being something that I could actually take on if they come up. And
Hmm.
I think focusing more on that might be better because like we're focusing more on what we can do rather than, what we have no control over.
Hmm. Yeah, so what's
It's
a handy thing to do with control? Kind of taking a look at your life and figuring out what's in your control and what's out of your control.
Well, I remember in what was it, Massimo's book when he was did the revision of the Enchiridion, right? I remember him saying like he gave an example of, actually doing like a pros and con list in one case. Because I think it was like it was a funny example of like the refrigerator breaking or something.
Hmm.
And he was in, New York and getting upset because we all get upset when these things happen, but then stopping and stepping back and saying, okay, well, what's like actually in my control, right? I can't control that this thing broke. I can't control that the food's going to spoil in a certain amount of time. I can't control what's open, but what can I do? Well, I can look up places to maybe get one. I could make an effort to go out and get the thing, right? Do what's in our power to actually do to change the circumstances positively or for us in a better way.
Hmm.
And I think it can be really helpful because, like, also too with dealing with like letdown as well. Like I think a lot of people searching for jobs are get let down a lot because there's so much competition out there now. There's so many there's so many people applying to jobs. It seems like, you're getting computers reading stuff that people don't even see yet, so you don't even know if it's getting looked at. And it can be really like it can really let you down because you think, well, I did all this stuff, I should just get the thing. But it's like,
Hmm.
well, maybe step back and ask, well, what's in my control that I could do to maybe make the circumstance better? Now, it's not guaranteed, but basically up your chances, right? And when you start to think that way, if you do make that list, I think you do see better results though, too. That's the other side of this that's important. And it also teaches you to not stress or spend so much mental energy on worrying about things that you can't change. Because I think that's the other side of it. Like when like things don't work out and we think it should have been in our control, or we believe that it should have been, then we get upset, then we start playing the victim or blame or whatever, and that sets us back rather than forward, I think.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you just got to throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall.
In
Um,
some sense, yeah.
hmm
And also ask yourself honestly, like, what am I doing that I could do differently? You know, am I really like serious about this? I mean, that's another good question too, because like that's in your control, right? Like, how serious are you taking this thing that you're trying to do? And are you putting in the effort?
hmm
Are you doing things that are different that make you stand out? Whatever.
I watched this video about some guy talking about when you're trying to get good at a whole bunch of different stuff. And he was like, you really just need to focus on one thing. Like
Yeah, because you can't.
and it's so frustrating because I know that, and yet at the same time, I want to do all these things. And it's just like, well, you're not
Oh,
gonna make
dude,
progress if you focus on all of them. You just gotta do one.
I struggle with that all the time because there's so many things I want to do. There's so many things I enjoy. And like even like hobbies where like I don't necessarily even want to turn them into anything like because everything's got to be for money,
Hmm
anymore. But like, even things I don't want to turn into money that I know I could get a lot better at if I spent more time. And that's the other hard part too of this is like managing that and managing your time and recognizing like what's within your power actually. What are you capable of reasonably or realistically, right?
hmm
Because I know you're like me. I mean, we have a lot going on. We try to do a lot of things and we want to like anybody else like we want to be good at all of them, you want to put your best self forward in all of them but
Dude,
it's
I
like also
suffer so much
impossible.
when I'm not good at something. It's like
I know.
brutal. I
Yeah, it
suffer so
sucks.
much just not being good at something. It's like, well, that's just part of the process. Can't be good at
and
everything.
I think part of it too is just stepping back too and asking yourself like what's how serious have I taken this, it's like have I put the time and like blah 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 and all that because I think some of it is too like I just can't do all these things all the time. And it's
Hmm
like so it's yeah, of course I'm not gonna be as advanced as I wanted to because I'm doing other things. So it's like yeah, makes it
hmm
very hard to makes it very hard to live sometimes and deal with that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Sometimes it's tough. This thing called life.
It is tough. It's very
Yeah. Yeah.
tough. But what do they say? We can control it, our actions, our attitude, our responses to things. Those are in our control. What's not in our control is the world around us.
Everything else.
Yeah, basically, right? Everything else.
hmm Everything that we think will bring us happiness is not in our control.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's funny,
But the
right?
things that actually bring us happiness are in our control.
But I think happiness is our in our control actually though too. That's
Hmm
the funny thing. Because with the Stoics at least, right? The emphasis is on virtue, character, and eudaimonia is possible just from that. So it is totally within our control, and part of it is like mostly our thinking. It's recognizing, you know, that we can do all we can, and if we focus on what's in our control, that's where happiness lies, not in the stuff that's outside, because
hmm
that's going to always bring us down rather than actually be a source of happiness.
Booyah.
Boom.
Mic drop. That's a great place to
There you
end it.
go. All right. Well, there you have it. Hope you like this episode. What's within your control. Um, if you liked it, check us out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Please like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. We'll be back later this week with another episode, though. Until then, later, Randy.
Later, Danny.